You are listening to the Cattle Call podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Tech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The Cattle Call podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cattle Call podcast with Jim and Rocco from Tech Consultants. I am Jim, your frighteningly loud yet strangely entertaining host. And with me, as always, is my partner.
It's Rocco. I don't know what I could say to that.
See, I'm saying, you know it's true because you're chuckling already. But it is still not going to save you from the most important part of the show, Rocco. It is time for the engineering joke of the week. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Strapped in.
How many engineers does it take to change a light bulb?
How many?
None. They just reclassify darkness as industry standard. It's awful. All right, folks. So today we have an old friend back on the show. Matt DeBasio who has the best tagline of anyone we've ever had on the program is here. Matt is a digital anarchist, which I love. Along with that, he is also an estimator and a construction technologist for Agnes Construction Management, and is always a lot of fun to have on the show. So Matt, thank you, sir, for being back on today.
Thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure to be back on with you.
Yeah, we'll see if it is by the time we're done. So today we're going to get into the concept of purpose-built estimating systems, right? The need for them and the lack of available options out there for industry-focused tools in this market. But before we kind of jump into that, though, let's give our new listeners a chance to learn a little bit about Matt first. So Matt, why don't you give the listeners a little bit of your personal background and what your role is over at Agnes?
Well, I've been here at Agnes for almost 19 years. Man, how time flies. And as you mentioned, I do sort of play two positions here, both in estimating pre-con and as a construction technologist. I guess that's the term that we're using nowadays. That's probably an 80-20 split time-wise. 80% in estimating and pre-con, but the technologist part is really seeking out improvements in the processes throughout the company and the tools or technology to support them, right? Researching, selecting, implementing the tools to support our people and the processes. I guess the good news is that with both of those roles, never ever bored, and that's what keeps me going. And so I think the topic for today and your request for me to join you guys was actually quite timely because lately I've been kind of really engaged in searching out purpose-built estimating systems, and I've learned quite a lot along the way.
It's always good to learn new things. I like that. All right, yeah. So like I said, the topic for today kind of came about when Matt reached out to tell us that his company at Agnes they were going to be dropping one of our estimating tools, and I of course asked him why. Now look, despite the fact that meant Rocco now had to sell his new puppy to pay for his life-saving hangnail surgery, all right, because Matt dropped our product and we're both now homeless and recording this from behind a Waffle House dumpster. But to be fair, I actually thought his reasoning was pretty sound. And I like to think that our Zen Estimate HVAC tool that Matt's guys were using is pretty solid. But his group did run into a problem that we faced using Bluebeam as our primary estimating tool. And he pointed out that it's an issue that he faces in all the industries and with all the estimating software that he's seen. So Matt, what exactly was the issue that your guys ran into that kind of prompted you to move away from our HVAC estimating tool? And why was it such a big issue for you?
Well, first off, I wasn't aware that us dropping the license for the HVAC estimating tool was what prompted this topic, but it's still a really important topic. So I'm glad if that was kind of the key that prompted it, then that's a good thing. Also, no disrespect meant to you guys on that, and I certainly didn't realize it was going to have such a huge economic impact on you. But
well, that's okay. We're behind the Waffle House. We got all the free, thrown away waffles we can eat, so it works.
As long as you get your hash brown smothered and covered, man.
There you go.
But truthfully, the type of takeoff that tool was meant for isn't really all that common for us as a GCCM, right? We tend to focus more on overall scope than specific quantities of ductwork or piping, which your HVAC takeoff tool was really meant to extract. That said, we had one particular project last year with a more substantial need for quantifying those things, and we thought it was warranted. And for that purpose, your tool worked great. It kind of fit the bill, and it allowed us to just keep chugging right along.
All right, because you said that, I'll share my hash browns with you.
Awesome. As long as they're smothered and covered.
Smothered and covered, no other way.
Also, I guess for only one user on one copy of Bluebeam, when it came time for renewal, we just didn't have that ongoing need to hold the license. But I'll also add that we do primarily use PlanSwift for 2D takeoff. So I think long term it would have not made as much sense to do everything else in PlanSwift and then HVAC stuff in Bluebeam and then try to transfer everything onto the master worksheet.
Makes perfect sense to me. So I'll take that as a good answer. So, all right. So look, the idea, I think, of a purpose-built estimating system, right? It's a solid one. To have something that's going to work exactly the way you need it in the field or industry that you're in. But those of us who live kind of on the development side of the house, we run into a really big issue when we're trying to put those things together, right? We're limited by, the openness or the lack of within the primary driving software, whether it's Bluebeam or PlanSwift or whatever else. In other words, there are kind of two ways to develop an estimating system like this, right? You can develop a quantity takeoff system, right? A program from the ground up, or you can work with, an existing quantity takeoff system and try to integrate industry specific custom features and tools for your trade or function, whatever you need, into that existing takeoff system. And I think the problem is there's not a lot of overlap between people who are capable of developing a takeoff system from scratch and people who have the necessary understanding of the design build industry to put together a workable process for specific construction procedures, right? So, at Zentech, right, we kind of opt for that second process, customizing Bluebeam, because we find that it's the most versatile quantity takeoff system, but that doesn't mean that it is going to answer everybody's needs and everybody's issues. So Matt, what's the biggest drawback that you've seen kind of in using Bluebeam or any other similar generalized quantity takeoff system as the primary driver for your construction estimating?
Well, I think first off, we really need to differentiate between an estimating system and quantity takeoff tools. And also the GCCM world that I live in versus specialty trades that require more robust tools like the ones that you guys build and the HVAC tool that we were just talking about. Bluebeam is certainly one tool that can be used for quantity takeoff, but it's also used for a ton of other everyday functions like markups for, we prepare logistics plans, phasing, infection control measures, laydown, et cetera, et cetera. Also searching the text within drawings or specs for a quick location. I mean, Bluebeam is and probably will always be, or at least should be, a staple in most users' tech arsenal in the AEC industry. And I think I've said it before on your podcast, and I'll say it again. If you work in AEC and you still use Adobe, please stop and get a copy of Bluebeam. It will change your life.
Absolutely.
Right? So, but
we can help with that.
Yeah, and Zentech will absolutely help with that. But I think a drawback would be the lack of integration, right? So Bluebeam or any other QTO tool like PlanSwift or OnScreen is great for our specialty task of getting quants from 2D plans, but that is not the estimate, right? Any items that you take off in those tools need to then be transferred somehow or another to a master estimate sheet as actual scope items that you'll buy out from subcontractors or self-perform. Like that is the project, right? And whether you're self-performing or you're budgeting in an early stage, you then have to apply cost and or time. And that's really the integration part, right? You got to connect those dots between lines or objects on a page and what it will take in money or time to actually build those things. And you mentioned I think the lack of overlap between specialty tools like quantity takeoff and then an understanding of like the total construction lifecycle. It's really true. There isn't a whole lot of overlap, but you began your question, I think, mentioning a purpose-built estimating system, and so that is the holy grail in which I seek.
There you go. So he's the Lancelot of this episode. So
yes,
we like that. So Rocco, let's. This is I hear this a lot, but you talk to a lot more people there. How many people that you talk to in our space are looking for that ability to integrate? Right, what Matt just defined as like the QTO process on the plans directly with the estimating pricing database, right, and the data that they can easily modify and update and get the costs related.
Yeah, it's a regular part of our daily conversation here. That integration with Excel, and Excel, of course, is just as widely used in construction as Bluebeam is these days. If not more, and so having an integration is huge, and the complexity of how people are using Excel is amazing. So it's part of our daily conversations,
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I hear it all the time too. So look, listeners of the show, you guys know that I am a huge fan of Bluebeam and what it can do. But I am always, whenever I get the opportunity, on the line with the people over at Bluebeam, asking them to please open their API, right? To give partners like Zentech the ability to work with guys like Matt to build these integrations and code in some of the intelligence, right, on the estimating and the pricing side that the base software just doesn't have. Unfortunately, I have not gotten a lot of positive response out of them or any of the other systems that we've partnered with over the years. Like we've been, PlanSwift and OST partners over the years, and we had the same issues. So Matt, I know that, right, your cost database, right, and that connectivity is a big issue for you. But we were talking about it. So what are your needs and your concerns around tracking historical pricing data and conceptual pricing, and how those kind of go together over a longer term?
Yeah. Wow, you got a lot of great thoughts flowing here. So I'll try to take these one by one. So on the open API thing, one thing that I found in my quest is that those tools that are local installs, right, they often don't have great or really any opportunity for API or further development or integration. So on that note, maybe cloud systems or pure web apps are a little bit more intriguing to try to connect those dots. For conceptual estimating and historical pricing, I believe maybe we've kind of created our own kind of limitations. As Rocco had just mentioned, Excel is still sort of like the lowest common denominator in estimating, right? Everybody uses it because it's super flexible, and this could even sort of bridge or straddle the fence between a local install app and a cloud app or a web-based app, because a lot of people are on Office 365 now, right? And you can, do a little bit more collaboration with Excel there. But since we also use good old Microsoft Excel for our estimates, I believe we create our own limitations because the data within each estimate ends up being very static. And what I mean by that is it becomes difficult to grab a piece from here and a piece from there and then reassemble that pricing info or productivity info into a current budget for a proposed project, right? That's, taking historical data and then, conceptualizing in the project that's in front of you at that moment. And on top of that, you need to apply different factors to each of those ingredients that you're pulling, from old estimates into the new recipe. Those historical numbers, whether they're geographic factors, right? Because things are different depending on location. A building in your area in North Jersey or New York Metro would be different than Philly or South Jersey or Delaware or Maryland, right? Or it would be different based on time frame. So depending on when the project occurred that you're pulling data from, right? Escalation is a big one these days, and we've seen really big changes over the past 4 or 5 years or so, and I really expect more of the same over the next 4 or 5 years probably, which makes it all the more critical to be able to do that factoring in the conceptual stage. I think last time I was on with you guys, we talked about the unpredictability of pricing and procurement, right? I need to re-listen to that episode to see if any of my predictions were accurate as of today. But the point is I believe it's possible to harness the power of that historical data with the right tools in hand. But it also, I think, takes some, like a mentality or an attitude that each estimate we prepare, daily or weekly, whether or not the project gets built, but preferably if it does get built, that data is literal gold. And harnessing that data over time can allow you to have almost superpowers with conceptual level estimating tasks.
Yeah. And it is. And I say, yeah, I think the hard part there, and I think you hit on it really well, is that while Excel is absolutely brilliant, and there's a reason why it holds up both the construction and the financial worlds, the data is siloed. It's locked into a file. And you've got to find a way to bridge that gap.
That's probably a better term. I use the term static. That's the way I view our data here. But siloed is, I think, the preferred term, right? It's kind of locked in, and it's hard to make it go anywhere else or leverage it.
Yeah. Yep. It doesn't go anywhere dynamically. You really have to manually go in and pull the data when you need it. And that's the hard part. So good points. All right. So I tell you what, folks, let's take a quick break to hear from today's sponsor. And when we get back, I want to talk to Matt about what his estimating process is today and the systems that he's been looking into to try and simplify it and get to the ends that he's looking for. So stand by, folks. We'll be back in just a minute with more of the Cattle Call Podcast. Hey, everybody. This is Jim and Rocco with ZenTech Consultants. And we wanted to talk to you a little bit today about the training options that we have available here for you guys at ZenTech Consultants. We offer public training classes as well as private custom courses for all of your software and design needs. So, Rocco, why don't you tell the folks what kind of training we offer and how do they reach out to us to get it going for them?
Yeah, Jim, we cover everything from Bluebeam to Autodesk to Microsoft to BricsCAD to civil site design training and beginner through to advanced level topics. Like you said, both public and private courses. If you got a group and want to run a class specifically for your team, we can help you. So just feel free to hit our website. We're at zentechconsultants.net. That's ZENTEK, or you can give us a ring, 866-824-4459, or even drop us an email, sales@zentechconsultants.net.
There you go, ZenTech Consultants for all of your technology training need. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cattle Call Podcast. We're talking with Matt DeBasio from Agnes Construction Management about the industry-wide need for custom or what we're calling purpose-built estimating systems. And in the top half, we kind of talked about the general need for and the lack of, a fully developed QTO costing system in this regard, right? And in this half, I kind of want to get a vibe from Matt on what systems he's seeing positive process on in this space, and how his team is handling their daily estimating processes without having the type of systems that he wants already up and running. So Matt, setting aside that you obviously hate Rocco and I and you want us in the poorhouse because you dropped our HVAC tool, what other systems have you been looking at and which one holds the most promise for you at the moment?
Well, I obviously don't hate you guys. I love your trainings. I love the podcast. This is my fourth time on here, I think, with you guys. And I love just geeking out with you guys on this stuff. So I started looking at some of the big guns, I guess you'd say, in the market for estimating solutions. And those would include Sage. We have Sage 300 CRE as our estimating, or I'm sorry, not our estimating, our accounting system. And so that was kind of a natural progression to look at Sage first. We've also been looking at Beck Technologies, right? Destiny Estimator, and they have a couple of add-on tools. And then ProS, which has recently been acquired by Autodesk. Those are all still on my list, and I've been working through each of them with my team. But it's really important to get this right. estimating is literally the lifeblood of the construction business, and so whatever we choose, we're gonna have to live with every single day.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to
Um,
make a mistake in that choice.
but I think, throughout this journey, I'll say, I've come across a couple tough lessons. One is that maybe my approach to searching or researching solutions maybe needs to change a little bit. So rather than Googling for, estimating software and then dropping my info on a website and waiting for a callback and scheduling a demo and making notes and reviewing with the team and so on, maybe I need to think bigger about what the ideal solution has or does. And I think that's why, joining you guys on a conversation like this helps me to sort of articulate what it is that it should be and what it shouldn't be. And also think really hard about what the future of estimating might look like, given the changes that we've discussed on previous podcasts, as well as, let's just say, the labor shortage, right? This is affecting all industries, including us. And I assure you there is not a lot of young people out there who are saying, I really want to be a construction estimator. And there's many reasons for that, but we won't go into a therapy session here. But one big reason is that the tools are maybe a bit antiquated. And so if you were to teach a young person both the science and the art of estimating, many of the processes that you need to teach, they need to be automated, right? First off, I think they would expect that in an increasingly automated and tech-driven world. And secondly, the projects are only getting more complex, so we need to sort of free up time and like human brain capacity to solve the problems on each process, like really build the project in your head, which at least right now that can't be automated. I mean, maybe it will in the future, but that's kind of where we're at in the near term, I think. And the second lesson maybe goes back to the local install versus cloud software thing. I think at this point, cloud may be the way to go. For the integration or API problem that you guys are looking to solve, but also just from a management standpoint, right? Any database that's backing such a solution would really need to be pretty well managed from like a pure IT standpoint. And most firms are just not set up to do that really well. Yeah. Right? So I think that would take the burden off a little bit. There are two newer tools that have recently come into play in my journey that fit that bill for the cloud software. And those are Concentric and Edify. They're fairly new as far as I know, but they seem very promising.
Okay, that's good. Good things to look at. And I agree with you. I mean, I think the cloud long-term is the answer. I think the limit we keep hitting right from the development side right now with the cloud is that when you're dealing with, cloud-based browser interface, they don't have the power and the functionality always that you can get out of a locally installed app. But you're absolutely right in that, the cost, the implementation factors, and the limitations of local installations are part of this issue. So I agree with most everything you're saying there. I got no issues with that.
I think I've maybe identified the trend that even though some cloud solutions maybe kind of fell short in that area that you guys were looking at from a functionality standpoint, I do think they've come a long way, and there's probably some tools out there that would that have surprised me in my search, certainly. And I feel like that's the trend to watch.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think, listen to what Matt's telling you, folks. That is the right way. That is the future. So, I think when you think of things like pricing databases, right, that need to be readily updated, right, and you need to, piecing together functionalities for things like Steel. I think even something simple like being able to generate custom output reports, all right, are a big part of the struggle that I think everybody in the estimating world faces, right? We run into it so often that, here at Zentech, right, we've actually, to kind of address some of this on our end, we've been actively engaging with third-party developers who offer their own back-end costing and reporting databases to integrate with our Bluebeam takeoff process. And it's not always perfect real-time integration. A lot of it does go back to what we were talking about earlier, using Excel in some form as a bridge. All right, so there's a little bit of a workflow to it, but we certainly recognize the importance of what Matt's been saying. So Rocco, what's what systems are we currently developing in conjunction with a pricing back-end software database, right? That kind of prompted, or rather what prompted that partnership?
Yeah, we're actually looking at, or we're in process of partnering with EJE, and what prompted it is again the regular discussions with our customers, right? I mean, they have the need for more functionality, and what they've got just out of Bluebeam and Excel in with these customers that we're talking to is not enough. And so we reached out and started having conversations, and the conversations are flowing, and we're developing our tools to better integrate with EJE in particular. So it's conversations. That's what keeps it all flowing and uncovering customers' needs. And so in our conversations with the EJE, it's like, well, yeah, we've got a lot of customers that are using Bluebeam who need more functionality. So what you guys are doing and what we're doing combined could really make a good marriage and hopefully satisfy some needs that a lot of our customers have.
Yep. All right. So Matt, let me ask you then, right? So, since you still, it sounds like, haven't found the perfect estimating system for all of your processes, what is your regular estimating process like on a daily basis, right? I mean, what software are you using, and what's the overall workflow that you're going through today?
Well, where we're at today is pretty much a best tool for the job kind of thing. Earlier, we spoke a little bit about sort of the specialization of certain tools. So for quantity takeoff, we use PlanSwift for 2D takeoffs. For the most part, we do use Bluebeam here and there for certain tasks. For 3D takeoffs, we use Assemble Systems, which is an Autodesk product. And for core estimating, we still use Microsoft Excel, again, because it is super flexible in terms of formulas and formatting, right?
Yeah.
Typical workflow would be, you scope the job in 2D, right? So either Bluebeam or PlanSwift, you're just going to do a quick page turn, figure out what trades are involved. Then you run through the quantity takeoff process, anything that's represented in the documents that you can pull quantities from. And in some cases, we don't even pull all quantities, right? If we have a job that's kind of accelerated, right, we don't have a lot of time to bid it, it's scope only, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not gonna go around counting light fixtures. I'm just gonna say light fixtures per schedule and so forth. But all those items, whether they're actually taken off, traced, counted in the takeoff software or not, end up as scope line items in the estimate worksheet. From there, you're gonna cost it. If it's a budget, you're gonna need the quantities, and then you apply actual cost. If it's scope only, you're simply gonna represent the work as best that you understand based on the documentation, and then you've got sub-pricing, and you're gonna acknowledge that everybody's got the scope that you need to buy from them, right? But the process is, it is what we know and what we do every day. But through that process every day, I'm constantly looking at, okay, well, what could we do better? And that transfer of scope items from takeoff tool to actual estimating, the looking up of historical costs or recent costs in order to kind of validate your units when you cost it out, and even beyond, right? So let's say we win the job and now you're into procurement. So now you've got to turn your master estimate into a buy sheet and each of your scope summaries into scope exhibits for contracts and so forth. I feel like there's a lot of opportunity in those areas to really improve with the right system. And I think there's a lot of systems out there that have discovered that, or at least they get it and they're working on it feverishly as we speak.
Okay, that's fair. So I tell you, from and this is my opinion, but I'm going to say that I don't think there's ever going to be, a commercially available one size fits all estimating system that's going to work for everybody's needs in the construction world. I just think there are so many component systems to take off on a commercial project, right? With very different requirements that no one software is ever going to be able to handle it. And I think if you couple that with every construction company having its own specific needs and its own specific processes and outputs that it has to have, that really kind of approaches the impossible. And I think if you're a large enough firm, right, you can kind of approach it from the aspect of developing their own in-house custom utilities, right, by hiring or contracting with, coders, right, to put it all together for you. But I'm not sure that's the answer either, because you still kind of face that problem, right, of either having to become, software developers while still being a construction firm, or teaching software developers about every aspect of construction, right? And not to mention, right, I think, the long-term costs of maintaining and updating the software as industry needs and company practices change. I think that's a hugely substantial investment in both time and money. So from that standpoint, Matt, I mean, have you looked into the idea of developing your own system for P. Agnes, or are you just kind of leaning towards finding the right partner, right? And for a better commercial software?
That's a great question. And I also want to say I agree with most everything you just said. I'm not sure if there will ever be kind of that the magic solution that's going to be one size fits all and commercially available. It will, maybe work for most, but not all situations or companies. And I also think that we've seen with other areas of construction technology what happens if a company tries to provide a product that's a little too general, right? And it's pretty good at a lot of different things, but it's not really good at what it needs to do. So in estimating, I'm not sure if that's a good thing, right? We need it to be really good at what it's supposed to be doing. So to answer the question about the idea of developing our own systems here, in my head, sure, right? That wouldn't it be, we should just make what we need, create it from scratch. But it's not practical for the reasons that you kind of described just a minute ago. For huge firms, they can approach it from, hey, we have this need, and they've got the resources to put behind it. For us as a mid-sized firm, we don't have the resources. We would have to hire an outside consultant or developer, and we'd have to work very, very closely alongside them to, not only teach them kind of our process or what it is that we're looking for, but, the long-term costs of doing that. You don't know how long it's going to take. Once it's done, you do have to maintain and update the tool. But I will say for the larger firms that can do it, I think we've seen some success stories. So the two tools that I mentioned earlier as being promising from the cloud side or the web apps, both of those actually came from larger firms that did exactly what you're suggesting, right? They found a need internally to improve and to try to develop a tool that suited their needs a little better. And I want to say it was Clark Construction on the West Coast. That's where Concentric came from. And Suffolk Construction, based out of Boston, but they have other offices, obviously. They're a really huge company. That's where Edify was born. So the idea that you're proposing, it's got precedent, I guess you'd say, right. But they came from really, really big companies that had resources to put into it, or at least an individual like myself where they just kind of set them loose and said, all right, either find it or build it, and we'll give you whatever you need to do it. And it's actually really pleasing to see that can happen, and also that this wasn't a tech company that said, hey, pre-construction and estimating is ripe for a new tool and we could probably make a lot of money off of it. It came from the actual need at an actual construction company, and then sort of blossomed into a commercially viable enterprise, right? So I like that, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, I think that's the only functional way for that to happen, and I think you get some good products that way, getting experts in the field to build it. But yeah, like you said, it's the investment that has to go behind it. You've got to be a multi-billion-dollar company to kind of handle that kind of setup. So But yeah, no, those are good tools to look at. So I like it. All right, folks, I'll tell you what, I always like to give our guests a chance to, monologue a little bit here at the end of the show so they can fill us in on thoughts and concepts that I just didn't think to ask about. So Matt, you've done this song and dance with us before. What about it, man? What other points do you want to hit on or have people think about in regard to these purpose-built estimating systems?
Well, maybe this could be just a recap of some of the points that you allowed me to share or that you guys made along the way here on the podcast. But the first thing is realize the difference between quantity takeoff and estimating, right? The full estimate. With that in mind, my ideal solution, I think, would have some sort of quantity takeoff component to it, and it would be integrated, right? So I can select from like a library of items or assemblies, no matter how simple or complex, but they would be pre-built, or you can maybe build your own as needed, and then apply that in a takeoff, like tracing walls or counting fixtures or something like that. And then those items are also tied with a database on the back end that give you kind of base unit cost pricing for whatever geographical area the project's in or whatever time frame you're looking for, and then have the ability to tweak it, right? So you kind of start with the baseline, and then you're able to, I don't want to say correct it, but override at your will for certain items that you have kind of validated pricing on for this particular case. I mean, we all know that you can't say concrete costs $400 a yard, right? Well, what are you pouring? Is it a giant slab, with, very minimal finishing, or is it a foundation wall or a column footer or something? It really depends. And everything that goes into that assembly, the formwork, the reinforcement, and so forth, it makes a big difference. So you start with a baseline, but then you're able to kind of massage it or override it at your will based on some of those factors that we talked about, right? What is the thing? What's the complexity? What's the challenge of installing that thing, or what have you? So that would be kind of one of the core components of, I believe, an ideal estimating system. The other thing that I think I sort of glossed over, but is maybe overlooked a little bit when we talk about estimating, is the end game, which is procurement. So once you win the estimate, what do you have to, what are your next steps? And for me, I have to create a buy sheet. That buy sheet has to go to accounting and then ultimately into the PM software. I also have to create scope exhibits, which become an attachment to each subcontractor purchase order. So getting all that information from the core estimate out to, kind of that next step, that's really, really important as well. And it seems like those the two tools that I mentioned, the cloud tools, it seems like they are on top of that. Like they've understood that, hey, there is another step to this after you come up with a project cost. And so I'm really excited to see what they're doing on that front. And then lastly, you guys had mentioned like output. So reports, I mean, we wouldn't call it a report, but a proposal. So once I finish my estimate, now I have to make it into a PDF and send it off to my client. Well, I want my client to be able to understand all the work that I did and be able to look at costs either at a very high level, a 30,000 foot view, or at a very granular level, based on those scope items and individual trades, and understand it well. And what I think Microsoft Excel can do for you is it makes it very easy to be flexible with how you present that, but it's also very difficult because it takes time to format those things in a way that might make sense or like at least fits on a page well. Sometimes we submit proposals where we have page limits, right? So we need to be able to condense fees and general conditions and staff rates and things like that into just a couple of pages and present it well so that they can take a look at it and they can understand it and hopefully drive a further conversation. But those are the things where, when we talk about estimating solutions, and I guess I'm taking this opportunity to kind of fill in the blanks because we talked a lot about some of the core things that everybody thinks about in estimating, like cost database, historical, conceptual, quantity takeoff. But these are all other aspects of the estimating process that we should be thinking about, and anybody that's looking to develop a solution or searching for a solution should also be thinking about.
There you go. So that's a nice list of what you need. So it seems pretty simple. I mean, we should be able to have that for you by what, Tuesday, Rocco?
Yeah,
no problem.
I think so. You guys let me know.
I'll let you know. So yeah. I think you hit all of that perfectly, man. It's a big scope, and there are those back end functions that just almost nobody addresses. So I'm glad to hear you're finding some folks who are at least moving in that direction. So I wish you well. Wish you well with that.
They are, yeah.
Cool. All right. So with that, folks, we are going to get out of here. But I want to thank Matt one more time for being on the show yet again. It is always a pleasure to talk to you, Matt. Even if you've completely destroyed our business by dropping your one single seat of our HVAC tools, we still love you, man.
Love you guys too. And yeah, sorry about that, but I'm sure you're going to be okay. And I'm actually really excited to see what else you guys come up with. So keep me posted.
We're going to take what you had on here and we're going to use it to help drive where we're going in the future. So that's why we love having you on.
All right. Well, I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with.
Sounds good. All right, folks, we're out of here and we will catch you next time on the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody. Today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net, or you can even call us 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you all.